Hello. In episode 4, I move to the period of coin use. I will outline the coining background to ancient Mediterranean history during the many centuries which lead to the War of Weights, the Islamic reform of 697. As I explained, before 1500 BC, long before coinage, a 16-ounce form of the Sumerian pound came into use in the Eastern Mediterranean. It had rivals at the time and developed more rivals later. However, as I hinted, that 500-gram standard perhaps lurked for 2 millennia in Northern Europe, and in a different sort of way, it seems it did so too around the Mediterranean. Coin use arrived after 600 BC or so, but before just diving into it, we must rid ourselves of the idea that coin weight and metrological weight are the same thing. Sometimes they are, but mostly they are not. Please always bear in mind that mints were factories, often producing millions of coins, and of course worked to a tolerance. Individual coin weight varied within the tolerance. The variation could be large or small. Large is rather snobbishly called Almaco minting, small is Al Paso. Coins do not make themselves. The cost of making them is called brassage, and quite often the weight might be reduced to pay this brassage. When charged on ancient and medieval silver, it seems to be about 2%. On top of that, states often applied a tax on the coin issue called the seigniorage. This can create a new lower weight standard for coin. For instance, Troy is a bullion weight, sterling is a coin weight, and sterling is 15/16 of Troy. So in that instance, theoretically, brassage and seigniorage are rolled together and charged at 6.25%. Seigniorage always was and remains a complex and contentious political and economic topic of concern. In general, coin weight and bullion or metrological weight are not usually the same thing. Think of them in the way tourist rates and mid-rates are linked today at currency exchanges. I am making rather basic points, but a dogmatic refusal to understand them is widespread. Is it possible that those getting the arbitrage profits on money are not keen for the rest of us to understand it? In the past, I have been called an ignorant and unpleasant person just for trying to explain this matter. Around 500 BC, the Persian Emperor Darius established a carefully controlled weight system, expressed in the stone weights mentioned earlier, but also in his gold Darics. In his case, metrology and coin weight were the same. Darius set very tight tolerance for coin production and must have paid the brassage out of general taxation. Here is a later Daric from about 350 BC. Notice it implies a mina of around 501 grams, so perhaps just a tiny bit overweight. Darius was very proud of his exact weight coinage. That is the only way we can make sense of a passage in Herodotus, number 4166. The story in Herodotus is nonsense. Ariandes did not strike any coins, and the coins of Darius are not especially pure. What did happen was Darius struck at full weight, and he was perhaps the first ever to do so. It is very likely that Darius then directly scoffed at substandard Greek coin weight. He called the Greeks shopkeepers rather than rulers. Those profiting from the laxity on the Greek side would find such criticism very unhelpful. This probably explains why Herodotus so garbled his account, and indeed why elite Oxford scholars today, even down to modern times, also fail to agree about what really happened. To the west, much early trade seems to be measured in Aegina turtles. These were silver staters of 2 drams. Many weigh about 12.2 grams, but many others weigh rather less. Notice that at 12.2 grams, 80 drams, which is 40 staters, comes out at about 488 grams. Clearly slightly underweight by the standard set by Darius, but in Mediterranean trade, 40 turtles apparently passed as an acceptable version of a 500-gram mina. Also very early, we find traditions at Athens about Solon, most especially that Athens used a special euboic mina of 70 Aegina drams. This euboic mina then became the Attic mina. Since 70/80 of 500 grams is about 437 grams, thus this is really a 2-ounce reduction to 14 ounces from the binary 16-ounce Mediterranean version of the Sumerian Mina. Here is a lovely Athenian 4-dram piece issued sometime after 450 BC. The target weight for these coins seems to be about 17.2 grams. This one is very slightly on the low side. They imply a consistent coin mina of 25 times 17.2, which is 430 grams. Notice that if we times 430 by 8/7, we get 491 grams. So production of this issue was both more consistent and closer to the full mark. It appears the Athenians not only fixed a big 2-ounce tax or seigniorage on their coinage, but charged on top a slender brassage or making charge of about 1.8% on coin over bullion. Somewhat like modern Britain, the Athenians had 2 different weight systems. One for fruit and veg and such like, which was a kind of 16-ounce market mina of about 455 grams, but the different decimal mina of 100 coin drams was about 430 grams. Here are a couple of commercial lead weights. The dolphin mina is overweight, the tortoise, a half mina, is underweight. Alexander the Great directly copied the Athenian monetary standard. Around 323 BC, the great treasuries of the Persian emperors at Persepolis and Susa were coined to the Attic standard. Again, the target seems to be around 17.2 grams for a 4-dram piece. So again, there was apparently a brassage of about 1.5%. The one I picture is a little heavier than normal. We have no records as to how early Rome fixed its weight standards, but before 225 BC, its pound, the libra, seems to have been fixed rather exactly at about 327.4 grams. Notice that if we abandon the decimalisation of the Attic mina, divide it into 16 ounces, then this Roman libra is just 12 such ounces. We see the standard most clearly in the rather rare early gold oath staters. It is from 48 such oath staters of 6.82 grams that we get the fixed standard. Now, 327.4 grams multiplied by 16/12 gives us a version of Attic as 436.5 grams. If we then take this 436.5 grams and multiply by 8/7, we get 499 grams. So the standard, as understood by the Roman public, was doubly reduced. But for anyone who understood the elementary arithmetic, the underlying Persian standard was exactly preserved. This British Museum example is again a little overweight. Soon after, something very strange happened to the silver denarius. It was as if the mint was playing a game with the general public. For a few years the denarius had been struck at 6 to the uncia, but soon the weight of individual coins became very random, with a new average weight of only about 3.9 grams. It seems the mint had started to strike at 7 to the ounce instead of 6 to the ounce, but was trying to disguise the fact by making the coin haphazardly. The odd thing is, since the Attic ounce was 7/8 of the notional Persian ounce, an issue struck at 7 to an Attic ounce would, by definition, go 8 to the Persian ounce. This makes a denarius that carries a big seigniorage when tariffed in local trade of about 14%. Meanwhile, for international trade, it was actually full weight with no deduction. The average coin could pay by count in bulk the full Persian standard, being in fact an eighth of a Persian ounce. The coin pictured is one that varies on the low side. Only from Nero onwards do we find the silver denarius correctly standardized at 1/8 of a Roman ounce. Here is a nice example from Hadrian. In a future episode, we will show why the modern British 16-ounce troy pound is, beyond reasonable doubt, a direct descendant of the Sumerian or Persian standard. Just a couple of generations back, it was quite well known in Britain that the ancient Aegina Stater was easily convertible into troy pennies. The pound of about 500 grams divides into 320 troy pennies and also into about 40 Aegina Staters, so it is very simple. Theoretically, the Aegina Stater is 8 troy pennies. This insight was, for instance, fundamental to the thought of Daniel MacDonald, a gifted engineer who bequeathed more than £11 million to Cambridge University in 1990. The institute, founded in his name by Lord Renfrew, teamed up with the John Templeton Trust in 2010 to erase from public consciousness the ideas of their engineer benefactor, all done in the name of spirituality. My explanation here rests on just 7 coin types, and I anticipate criticism in that reality is far more complex. My reply is, okay, have a shot at explaining the value of the modern US dollar, and be sure to include the details of every different state, sales and local tax deduction. I will not be holding my breath. Perhaps, like me, you can only follow the numbers if you see them written down. If so, this is a table for you to study if you wish. I will leave it on the screen for a while. There are only 2 things I think important to memorize. Attic is 7/8 of Persian, and Roman is 12/16 of Attic. Thanks for listening.